again, everyone. Thank you again for your patience. Thank you for being here. We're happy that you were able to join us this morning. And, we do have some very serious matters that we're going to be sharing with you. We apologize for the delayed start, but we're going to get right into it pretty much. So, welcome to today's press conference, Vision 2030 at Risk, the impact of theft and vandalism on national development. I'm Keon Mitchell, Director of Communications at Flow Jamaica, and also your moderator this morning. I also want to welcome members of the media, our special guests here, as well as those persons who are joining online. We're happy to have you here, and we'll ensure that, especially for the persons online, you'll have your opportunity to ask your questions as well. A very special welcome as well to our panelists this morning, our speakers, Honorable Darrell Vaz, Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, Mrs. Caroline Ferguson Arnold from the Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities, Mrs. Jacqueline Sharp, Vice President of the PSOJ, Mr. Ian Nita, immediate past President of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, and Senior Superintendent Stephanie Lindsay, Head of Communications at the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Welcome to you all, and again, thank you for joining us this morning. Now, our telecommunications industry, and Flow Jamaica in particular, has been plagued by the long-standing issue of theft and vandalism. And we're talking about vandalism of our infrastructure, our telecommunications infrastructure, and our network elements. As the provider of choice across various sectors and industries, this has had significant impact on the businesses we serve, and also our many customers all across the country. Since the start of the year, we have recorded even more incidents of theft and vandalism, including on our fiber network, in which significant investments are being made to bring connectivity to more businesses and communities across the country. So today, we'll be hearing from our key stakeholders as they all share more on the impact of theft and vandalism. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Stephen Price, our Vice President and General Manager. Yes, you can clap.
Honorable Darrell Vaz, Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, Mrs. Caroline Ferguson Arnold, Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities at the OUR, Mrs. Jacqueline Sharp, Vice President, the PSOJ, the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, Mr. Ian Nita, immediate past President of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, Stephanie Lindsay, my friend and colleague, Head of Communications at the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Distinguished guests here and online, good morning. Thank you for being here. Today we've invited you here so we can share the crippling effects and impact of theft and vandalism on our critical ICT infrastructure right across the island. This morning I was awoken at 2 a.m. by a call from Inspector Grant at Matilda's Ghana, awakening me to the fact that they intercepted a truck laden with cables belonging to the company. Right now, I'd say estimated thousands of customers across Kingston and St. Andrew are right now out of service. We're in the process of restoring that, but this is a significant hit to our infrastructure today. We have been at the forefront of this fight for the past 10 years, and really, how could we not? We've been vocal, sometimes to our own detriment, to even death threats to our own people. We've met with stakeholders, communities, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the government across multiple administrations, and over the past 10 years, we've seen minimal improvement. While consumers suffer, businesses buckle, and for us, our investments are being eroded. All the while, telecoms operators are being asked to invest more, connect more. Vision 2030 has been the driving force behind many of our programs and initiatives. We want the best for Jamaica. Indeed, Jamaica's future depends on it, becoming a digitally empowered nation sooner rather than later. And we know this coming out of the pandemic, what deleterious effects this can have on a nation. Mr. Vaz is here, and he knows only too well what is at stake and has been an advocate for the changes required and a strong ally so far and will continue to be in the future. So today, let me tell you, we're sharing in full our experience with theft and vandalism on our network infrastructure and elements, the full magnitude of this devastating impact and what it means for a nation. Now, these are the items that are frequently vandalized and stolen. And we indicate a lot of them right over there on that table. Most persons know about the copper cables, and we have some copper cables here displayed. Some we use in our mobile network, some we use in our fixed network. You'll see a box there with burnt cables. And after theft, that's usually what happens with these thieves and vandals. They burn the cable for access to the scrap metal industry to dispose of them by that means. But there are other elements which we suffer from. And this goes across all public utilities. JPS has been losing transformers. Digicel and ourselves, we lose batteries, we lose diesel fuel, both aerial and underground, broadband lines, so many things, generators, entire generators are actually taken from sites as well. So we live in a world where none of our infrastructure is safe. This is important because often a perception that theft and vandalism only affects fixed services, broadband, landlines, cable TV. But I want to highlight that when we have commercial power outages, batteries, generators, and fuel go missing, and our mobile sites are also affected. This results in dropped calls or no calls pending the community that has been hit, as thieves have gone with the backup resource. Our fiber network is being vandalized. I don't even think some of our thieves understand what they're cutting whenever they do cut. And on this note, let me make it clear that collectively, over 97% of our outage are due to external factors. 90.5% of them confirmed and suspected power outage. And if you don't have the backup resources, the batteries are being stolen, these are the challenges that you face. And another 7.2% are because of physical damage to plant. And this is things like copper theft, stealing copper bars off towers, even at times endangering the community around them by stealing elements from towers as well, which keep the towers upright in communities. And if we don't identify these, imagine the risk of a hurricane or something like that passing through and a tower comes down on a home, right? So we have to make sure that we hit this and hit this extremely hard. Now, the latest act of theft this morning, and I'm going to throw it to Keisha, who will show the video of Hillcrest Avenue this morning. It was really difficult to see. They cut over 4 different cables along that route. Now, if you understand what happens whenever you cut one of these big 2400 pair cables, every one of these pairs carry almost 52 volts. Whenever a cut like this happens, 52 volts is run back into our systems and damages the infrastructure at the core, at the switching centers. For us, if somebody is actually working on that plant or that switch, imagine 2400 pair, right? 52 volts of electricity going back to somebody at a site working on that. We could have lost people with these acts, it is unfathomable to see something like that could happen. Keisha, can you bring up the video?
This is Hillcrest Avenue in the Matildas Corner police area. Police would have intercepted a truck that pulls some flow fiber optic cable from out of the drain, and I'm almost in the middle of Hillcrest Avenue and walking down. You see the amount of cable that he has pulled out, causing a disruption of services in the entire area. So he pulled them out, cut them up, and was about to remove them when he was intercepted by the Matildas Corner police, who are presently on location. They have called Erica to come and take the truck to the Alpha Tree police station. We're also going to remove the cables from this location. As you can see, the Erica has just arrived to move with the truck, and this is the cable. It's about 250 to 300 meters.
What has happened? They've cut the cables underground in the underground conduits. They've tied that cable to a truck and have driven away and pulled out all these lengths of cables right from underneath, right? And this happens in multiple places right across the country. Now, you look at the hot spots and hot parishes that are repeatedly vandalized. The parishes that have the most incidents, as you can see, St. Catherine is the highest parish. Portmore, Spanish Town have been really plagued over this past year in particular. And these are the communities where you have theft happening in particular communities over 4 times, repeatedly, to restore, give back service to consumers, stolen again. And there's a time when it comes in a business's life, do you invest? Do you put back infrastructure? But we recognize the need for our citizens of this country, for the technology that is there. And we have to go back in some of these communities to make sure that we put it in. But we need protection. Our most recent area that's becoming a hotspot is Santa Cruz, right? Where we have schools and police stations impacted, even though we have replaced infrastructure 3 times over the past 5 months, right? This is absolutely untenable, and it's not a sustainable business model. What we can see, there are emerging trends also happening, which have a devastating blow to our business community. Our business and commercial districts are under attack now. As you can see with this recent hit at Hillcrest, Halfway Tree has been hit already. Crossroads has been hit. Hagley Park Road, especially that corridor leading to the ports. Imagine the crippling effect this can have on our ports, especially in a busy Christmas season like this. Upper Maxfield, the industrial belts, Newport West has been hit, right? Spanish Town Road, Marcus Garvey Drive. Major blows have happened in those communities in particular. Now, if we look at the parishes currently impacted, firstly, we are thankful that there have been no hits in St. James and Hanover, and maybe I may be speaking out of turn at this point, right? But we have been collaborating very well in those communities, and we have not necessarily seen anything or damage there. There is vandalism that occurs in St. James, right? But that's also another challenge that we have to face. But look at the rest of the country. We've recorded over 319 incidents so far this year. 59 of them have been in St. Catherine. Kingston, St. Catherine, and See, Kingston, Clarendon, and St. Thomas account for 98. 84 incidents have been recorded in the northeast region of St. Anne, St. Mary, and Portland. I know Minister Vaz knows about the recent ones in Portland. And the central region accounts for 67. And this is the copper network where we're delivering critical services to power hospitals, schools, hotels, BPOs, small businesses, and many more. It is challenging for us as a business. If we go back to 2016, we had over 1,090 incidents of vandalism between then and now. 250 communities have been impacted. We've incurred restoration costs of over 15 million US dollars, excluding loss of revenue to us and the investment in a comprehensive asset protection program. And what we've seen are low fines and sentences that in no way reflect the debilitating effect of the crimes committed. Petty larceny is often the only charge we go to in some of these instances. And we know that's a tap on the wrist for many of these criminals. But even what we have spent in terms of restoration, we haven't spoken about the revenue lost. We haven't spoken about the loss of revenue to the businesses that are served. We've not spoken about the educational loss. We've not spoken about the loss to our citizens and the inability to contact the fire services, to contact the police, right? To contact an ambulance for their own health. These are the costs and hidden costs of these challenges that we're seeing. In looking at the past 7 years in terms of stolen copper cables, as you can see, the best year was the year we shut down the scrap metal trade. 2017, when we implemented a temporary ban on copper exports or on scrap metal exports. But ever since, you can see the humongous rise that has been happening. On the vandalized side, same is true. You're not going to have vandalism if there is a ban. There's a direct correlation between the ban on copper exports and the decline in incidents of vandalism and theft. We don't have a scrap metal industry. We have a scrap metal opportunity. We don't produce metal here, right? So we have just an opportunity. So that's something I know Minister Vaz is keen on and will speak to later. So if you look at what's happening now in 2022, you see the hotspots. Here's the cumulative data on a parish by parish basis for this year that shows another visual representation of which parishes have recorded the most incidents of theft and vandalism. And as they come into city center, Kingston and St. Andrew, this is where it gets perilous, especially for the business district, the heart and lungs of our business district that supports this country on our way to economic growth and prosperity. Now, if you think about it, one could ask, why are we doing this now? But if not now, when? Time come. In 2021, we had over 600 incidents of theft and vandalism. And since 2022, we are now at 630 with a few weeks to go in the year. 323 communities are currently affected. We have spent millions so far this year restoring this. And notwithstanding this, we continue to invest in our fiber network. Over the past 5 years, we've invested over 370 million, expanding our fiber network to over 700 communities, bringing access to over 200,000 households. But look at what's happening. 111 acts of vandalism of the fiber network as well. What's the message here for investors? Are we serious about Vision 2030 Jamaica? Are we serious about advancing the achievement of sustainable development goals, leaving no one behind? Wanting Jamaica to be the place of choice to live, work, do business, raise families? I know Minister Vaz has heard us. I know he will answer the call this morning. Residential customers, I've said before, whenever these outages happen, they have no access to contact emergency services. Imagine being home. Imagine having an elderly parent at home alone. No way to call the police. No service for education, personal business, entertainment. Inability to communicate with loved ones. No internet access for research purposes. Communities are at a higher risk for criminal activity if we don't have these lifelines between themselves and the Jamaica Constabulary Force to respond when incidents like these happen. We see headlines about persons being unable to contact emergency services when there's a shooting or a fire. These are the casualties of things like this with vandalism. So think about it. 12,340 residential customers have been hit since January 2022 because of vandalism, right? Imagine what could have happened if any of these were plagued on by the criminal elements that are running about town. Businesses are also suffering. No access to power business if you have ICT access. No service to facilitate the completion of transactions, point of sale and ATM. I know Mrs. Sharp can tell you about what's happening to her business this morning. No access to online services. Impact on e-commerce. Inability to communicate with customers. Over 1,118 businesses have been impacted since January 2021. The time is now. And then there's the impact on our own business. Increased restoration costs. Increased replacement costs. Reduced investment to expand the fiber network. I could have used that 15 million to bring the internet to more homes across the country. With that 15 million, we could have gotten 100,000 more homes built. Right? That's the sacrifice that we make for this. Obviously, we have reputational damage because consumer doesn't care. Consumer just wants their service, right? Impact on service delivery. Loss of customers, right? It's not sustainable. 2 million per year for restorations. A few weeks ago, I shared the stage with Minister Vaz and I asked, what future do you envision for Jamaica? He envisions the same future. We spoke about JUMP, a program in bringing internet connectivity to the unserved. This is one of the things that can derail that. We have to act now. What vision do we envision for our country? We don't want one overrun with criminality. One where criminal elements hold a nation under siege like this. One where we're suspected, and I call this again, this is domestic terrorism. This is, you're attacking the state when you attack the national infrastructure of a country. You're attacking the state. You're attacking the state, the country from meeting its goals and bringing improvement to all. We are the provider of choice for the country's major industries. Industries that Jamaica depends on to survive. Tourism, hospitality, BPO global services, finance. Think about finance in particular. Every transaction you do runs across our networks. Right? Think about remittances. Runs across our networks. Think about small business, the engine room of growth for this economy. Runs on our networks. When our services are affected, there are a major wave that affects tens of thousands. You think about police stations and schools. St. Mary Technical, out of service since August. And at best, we're looking at January 2023 for restoration. The Belmont Academy, the Lacovia Police Station, for one. Right? Lacovia Police Station is working off mobile phones right now in order for them to get their calls for emergency response. Vision 2030 cannot be achieved if the critical ICT infrastructure power in the country is not protected. As you can see on the previous slides, the scrap metal industry negatively impacts our operations, and not only my operations. I'm sure if Gary Barrow was here, he would tell you about the operations of the Jamaica Public Service. I'm sure if Jabor was here from Digicel, he'd tell you about how it impacts him at Digicel. I'm sure if Matt Barnett was here, he would tell you what scrap metal has done to the water infrastructure of the country. Right? There are some who would want to have the nation believe otherwise. But as we've said before, the industry cannot be properly managed and supervised. It should be shut down or a permanent ban imposed on the export of copper. The images you see are of our stolen copper cables at the premises of an authorized, let me tell you, an authorized scrap metal dealer in March 2020. Right? During the heights of the pandemic, when we needed to have our kids connected, when we needed to be home working to protect the nation from this COVID pandemic. These are the things that have been happening. How many will have to suffer before we do what is necessary? I want to highlight the support of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. So Lindsay, it has been an amazing partnership that we've had to date with our security team. You have been helping us with the fight. We're receiving more information from the public as persons are becoming more impatient with service outages due to these criminal acts. And the JCF has been swift in acting on information and arresting the perpetrators. We look forward to your continued support. What are we doing to protect our infrastructure? We have our security operations center, right? Where we have 24/7 operations, CCTV where possible. Just understand, we have over 100,000 kilometers of cable right across the length and breadth of the country. If we were to secure that all ourselves, I think we'd have a force about 3 times the JCF plus the JDF as well, right? So we have to rely on the public. We have to rely on the state as well. We relocate, we protect at-risk infrastructure by putting them underground. And let me tell you, we've done so many things in that space to the point where we have manholes that we have poured concrete in. You know what a manhole is for? So you can access your infrastructure. We've poured concrete in them. And in some instances, they've broken through the concrete in order to get the cables, as in Spanish Town on many occasions. So we have surveillance cameras, intrusion detection systems, sensors at fuel tanks. We have electrified fences, right, which is a controversial stance for us in some instances. Tracking devices, mechanical cages, fabrication of generators, reinforced concrete vaults, sealing of manholes, welding manhole covers shut. You know the difficulty of having to unweld a manhole just to enter it to service your infrastructure. We have community watchman programs, and that's one thing that has really helped over the past couple of years. We've engaged private security firms and investigators. We've engaged in the communities through town hall meetings, and we're lobbying for the legislation to change. Now, it's time for stiffer fines and longer sentences. The punishment must match the crime. Terrorism must be paid with the kind of fines and the kind of jail terms that's necessary. Let me share some quick example of what's happening. January 2022, one person sentenced, non-custodial, 1 year probation, 120 hours community service, training in decision making and substance abuse. He has stolen cell site batteries over $740,000 and went on to do the same thing again. May 2022, two persons sentenced to 20 months. They had already served 1 year before. Last 8 months at hard labor. Charges were for simple larceny, malicious destruction of property, trespassing on the works of a telecoms firm, not keeping them locked up enough. July 22, each of the two men fined $43,000 or 15 days imprisonment. They were in lockup since May 7, 2022. They were charged with unlawful possession of flow copper cables. November, two men arrested and charged by Runaway Bay Police for stealing copper cables. A full Toyota Hiace minibus laden with the stolen cables is also seized. That one is still in the courts. Two men arrested in December so far by St. Catherine North Police for stealing copper cables in Portmore. 25 matters outstanding in the courts involving 39 persons charged for various offenses, including simple larceny, unlawful possession, malicious destruction of property, and trespassing on the works of a telecommunications firm. Some of these right now date back to 2016. Right? So they don't feel the penalties. They don't feel the effect. And many of them go on to do this again. So, under the current prosecutions under the Malicious Injuries to Property Act and Larceny Act include fines and sentences ranging from 3 months to 10 years. Under the Malicious Injuries to Property Act, under Section 29, we have the vandalism of our sites, poles, batteries, fiber and copper would fall under the Section 29. Destroying electronic telegraph. The punishment imposed would be on indictment, imprisonment up to but not in excess of 2 years, with or without hard labor, or summarily imprisonment up to but not in excess of 3 months imprisonment, with or without hard labor, or a fine of 4,000 Jamaican dollars. Recent amendment was moved to $250,000 under the Law Reform Amendment of Penalties Act in 2019. These are things that we have to address. In summary, any vandalism of telecommunications infrastructure should be protected under specific legislation. I know we've worked hard with Minister Vaz, shared with him some of the legislative changes that we believe are necessary, and I know he's definitely on board in terms of moving that. But we have to address the penalties under the legislation. It really has to be set at such levels that they act as instant deterrence to anyone who contemplates such offenses. Right now, a criminal can make a business case and say, well, I pay a $250,000 fine. Yeah, I'm going back into the business again. Right? An act of vandalism of telecoms infrastructure could be prosecuted under the Terrorism Prevention Act. The penalty for this offense is life imprisonment, and it is that serious. We also urge the swift implementation of the ban on copper exports, and we have already shared with the administration how this could be managed. Ladies and gentlemen, we want our country, our people, our businesses and children to thrive. It's been a hard road, but we remain firmly committed to Jamaica and to enabling the progress of our fellow Jamaicans. but we can only deliver critical ICT services with the full support of all key stakeholders. And most of us are here at this table: the government, the regulator, the JCF, and our business partners. We have been talking about this for years, and now is the time for action. We've already shared all our recommendations, and we are now sharing our experience and recommendations publicly so that all well-thinking citizens can add their voices and contributions to address this scourge. We also call on the citizens as well to continue to do what you're doing in highlighting, questioning, looking at what's happening in their individual communities, and telling us when they see persons on our lines, when they see persons doing things. Each of our employees are identified, and even if further questions need to be asked, they can be easily be identified by our company, right? So even if you see one of us in a blue shirt, and you see something happening that don't look too right, call the police. We are properly identified, and we know where our people are. We look forward to working with the government in short order to move this forward so that it can be addressed in the next parliamentary cycle. I know it's a lot of things that I've just raised, but time comes, and we need to act now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Stephen. A very sobering presentation. And just for our friends here and also online, when you hear Stephen speaking about the millions of dollars, we're talking about US dollars. So you can do the conversion. It's not Jamaican millions. We're talking about millions of US dollars. Now, while you reflect a bit and digest, we are going to take a very short break, and right after 2 minutes, we will hear from our other speakers this morning. We'll be right back.
I'm Anthony Davis, retired Director of Sport at the University of Technology. I was watching television and I noticed I saw this ad, and it was repeated several times, and I became very interested. I was motivated to sign up for the course because everything around us is going digital, and I recognize that as you get older, you could get left behind. In addition to, I have grandchildren who are in school. They are of the digital age, and sometimes I'm able to help them pretty much because of doing the course. The exciting part about it is there's no cost. You can stay in your home, you can do it at your own leisure. I really want to say thank you to Flow Foundation and to the Caribbean School of Data for introducing the Skills for the Future program, and I hope more people will take advantage of it.
I was on Instagram and I saw a poster just flowing around Instagram, and I immediately take a screenshot of it and I started to pass it to my friends to say, hey, let's do these courses. My name is Vanessa Brown. I am a teacher at the Edith Dalton James High School. I saw a list of programs that the Flow Foundation had to offer, and immediately leadership caught my attention. It's easy. I find it easy and challenging at the same time. My initial goal was to improve my leadership skills. My next step is to apply all that I've learned, not only in the classroom, but in my everyday life. I would definitely recommend this Training for Professionals program to friends and colleagues because it has a lot to offer and there's a lot to learn. I want to say a big thank you to the Flow Foundation.
All right, thank you everyone for your patience, and we are back and live. And as I mentioned, for persons who may have missed it, we are making reference to US dollars, not Jamaican dollars. Want to ensure that those numbers are accurately shared. And of course, you can do the conversion. So as Jamaica's largest network provider, unplanned service disruptions of this nature have national implications. Small and large businesses, schools, entrepreneurs all require our services, and they all suffer the consequences when these malicious acts take place. So joining us this morning, I will be introducing, for everyone's benefit, our panel. So from my immediate left, we have Senior Superintendent Stephanie Lindsay, who is our Head of Communications at the JCF. We have Honorable Darrell Vaz, Minister of Science, Energy and Technology. Mr. Stephen Price, Vice President and General Manager at Flow Jamaica. Mr. Ian Nita, immediate past President of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. And Mrs. Jacqueline Sharp, Vice President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, and Mrs. Carolyn Ferguson Arnold from the Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities at the OEUR. So, welcome again, panel, and at this time, we just spoke about the incident this morning on Hillcrest, so it's an opportune time for us to hear from the JCF. So please welcome Senior Superintendent Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Honorable Minister Vaz, Mr. Stephen Price, and other panelists. Good morning. I can tell you that, thank you, Stephen, for that very comprehensive presentation. It made my work very, very easy because you went through all the information. But I just want to stand here to tell you that the Jamaica Constabulary Force is fully committed to the process of working with the Flow and the other service providers who are affected by these acts of criminality to ensure that we can reduce the incidents. We have maintained a very long and strong relationship with Flow in ensuring that we put systems in place to reduce the incidents of vandalism and larceny of their infrastructure. No one can underestimate the impact that it has on national security. Because I can't think of an industry that can operate without internet, without telephone, when you look at what's happening with education and how we have to revert to online studies. When we look at the different incidents around security and safety, and many times when we have call for service and when persons are having serious challenges and they can't get to the police, it is a big problem. We have seen where, and having worked, I remember back in the days when I used to be in St. Mary, and when I looked at the chart that you put up, Steve, I mean, things have changed. We used to see these incidents happening in the rural parishes. We implemented a number of things to even include neighborhood watches and local watches, and those worked very well because it's one of the things that you can really get people to support because it impacts families, it impacts household. So when we had those programs where people call in and give information, we were able to arrest a number of persons. But what we recognize is that they shift their operation. So you arrest some persons in St. Mary, we arrest some persons in St. Anne, we see the shift to St. Catherine. We also look from an investigative standpoint where we see in some instances a correlation between the theft of these infrastructure to organized criminal network. I heard from Stephen how he spoke about the consequences based on the legislative framework that's available. And from time to time, you'll hear our very own commissioner say that we believe that to prevent some things from happening or to deter people from doing things, then consequences matter. So we too want to see that when these acts of criminality are done and perpetrators are held, they must account and account in a significant way. So you will see, I mean, our organized crime branch is very involved in the investigation of these matters, and you can expect to see more use of the Proceed Against Crime Act in these instances, because we look at larceny, we look at the malicious destruction of property, unlawful possession of property, but based on how we are tracking the proceeds now, we are seeing where a lot of the money that come from this very lucrative industry, because it is lucrative, so much so that we have to place police on a permanent basis at the scrap metal outlet to prevent gangs from killing each other because of the proceed of the crime. So we will be using more poker against individuals who are arrested in these cases. So Mr. Price, those legislation have some more consequences assigned to it. But we continue to do what we have to do. We continue to engage the Jamaican people to report. And you can always call our 311 line, that's Crime Stop, and report a matter when it's happening. You can also call our 119 emergency service and report the matters. And we also have our tip line at 811. Because this is not something that we can leave to any one set of persons. All of Jamaica, every household, every individual. I mean, we spoke about the incident this morning where the police were on patrol. Somebody saw something, alerted the police, and they went there. And what they saw, someone damaging the infrastructure. I am sure that some of our own police stations will be affected because of the disruption in the service. So we have someone in custody, and the investigators are busy doing a lot of work and tracking a lot of things because a vehicle was found, and I can tell you at this stage of the investigation, that vehicle was seen elsewhere where something similar happened. So they are now working with investigators in St. Catherine and other places to see how we put these bits of information together and to close in on the investigation. But it is a very serious matter. It's something that we have to continue to dialogue and to devise systems and mechanisms, Mr. Price, to see how we, because when it comes to organized criminal network, and working, they are always reinventing. So you put one system in place, they are going to go back to the drawing board and they are going to track it. They track how we operate our police operations, whether we do some with the military as well. So they know when we are working in one parish and they see what's happening there. So they move to another place. We see what's happening now in St. Elizabeth, Santa Cruz. Our police station in La Cova, we don't have service. So it affects our ability to respond to citizens' call for service. And like Stephen mentioned, that the citizens really don't care why they're not getting the service. They see it as the JCF not responding. And I can tell you, as a force for good, it is something that we really want to do everything that we can to ensure that we, one, apprehend these perpetrators and bring them before the court, and also to see how best we can put other systems in place to prevent these things from happening. We know that a number of cases are currently before the court. We work very, very closely with Mr. Wright and his team to deal with these matters, but we know that a vital infrastructure as the telecommunication industry is one that we can't spare any efforts, any legislative support, policing resources to ensure that we catch these individuals. And where we catch them, we also want to see consequences that are attached to it that when a person decides to commit the breach, they know very well what is it they're up against. So we continue, and we will continue to have our police officers at these various locations where they are involved in the scrap metal industry to ensure that part of what they're there to do is to see if they can detect. And we have arrested persons, even persons who are part of the industry, and put them before the court. Because I don't think the industry is a problem, but we have to look carefully at some of the players who are in the industry to ensure that they meet the threshold of persons who can be trusted to operate legitimately. So, ladies and gentlemen, the JCF, the Force for Good, we are committed to working with Flow and the other service provider in putting some measures in place to treat with the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior Superintendent Lindsay. We do appreciate your support and all you do. Now, the Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities has been at the forefront of consumer advocacy activities in Jamaica, and they hear firsthand from consumers affected by theft and vandalism. So let's now hear from Mrs. Caroline Ferguson-Arnold from the CACU. Please make her welcome.
Minister Vaz, other distinguished panelists, good morning, everyone. Good morning. The CACU joins the voices of all well-thinking Jamaicans in condemning the frequent and unlawful acts of theft of the country's critical infrastructure and calls on the government of Jamaica, the private sector, and all civic organizations to combine our efforts to put an end to this long-standing criminal act. Let me take this opportunity to say a bit about the CACU and what we do. The CACU, Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities, is a consumer advocate group of interested and concerned citizens which advises the Office of Utilities Regulation, the OUR, with a forum through which it can receive consumers' views on broad regulatory issues as well as their perspectives on issues affecting the relationship between the companies and consumers. We fulfill our mandate by, but not limited to, responding to consultative documents issued by the OUR and interacting with the utility companies to discuss and address issues which affect paying customers of electricity, telecoms, water, sewerage, and any other related utility services. The CACU is of the view that this issue of theft and vandalism is a form of organized crime which continues to have a significant and deleterious impact on businesses, communities, and the economy as a whole. It affects the electricity, telecommunications, and transport sectors of the economy. And year after year, millions of dollars are spent replacing stolen cables and restoring vandalized infrastructure. In Jamaica's case, the theft is allegedly associated with criminal activities, as we just heard from Senior Superintendent. The theft of copper cables and associated network infrastructure to make easy money carry out criminal activities has a significant impact on the local economy and costs the telecom companies and, importantly, the paying customer millions of dollars each year, given the high replacement costs of this infrastructure and increased costs that are passed on to paying customers. Any disruption to internet connectivity due to cable theft and vandalism places the entire productive economy at a disadvantage, and I think we can all identify with this. Not only are businesses affected, but also schools, learning and training institutions, and other critical public infrastructure. Foreign direct investment is also affected by this criminal activity. Another important point to make is that theft of the public infrastructure is a threat to our national security. As we in Jamaica boast about our proposed implementation of smart cities and infrastructure, what is now common practice of cable theft will affect this view. It will affect your electricity, causing power outages. It will disrupt operations in our hospitals, health centers, and more importantly, the telephone network, which is the backbone of any modern and developed country. It begs the question, why is the infrastructure being damaged? If we are honest, we can say that the copper is likely being exported, as we do not have a copper industry as such here in Jamaica. Not that we can say we know for sure. The matter of the fiber being damaged may be attributed to nefarious motives or, shall we say, mistaken identity. Let's say the perpetrators are thinking that they are in fact cutting copper cables. There is no resale value here in fiber. In addition, we posit that the government intervention is urgently required. This is not an issue the telecoms company can solve on its own. We think the government needs to treat this issue as a critical matter and speedily implement the necessary and required interventions to reduce these crimes. An immediate review of the penalties associated with this activity is in order, and an equally important implementation of stiffer criminal penalties for these offenses. We also want to appeal to our fellow citizens. Through heightened public education, all of us should be aware of the reasons why this important and critical infrastructure must be protected and maintained to ensure continued development of our economy and services to the upstanding citizens of our country. We, all of us, need to play our part in ridding our country of this scourge and support the continued improvement of our country, Jamaica, land we love. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ferguson Arnold. And at this time, we will do a switch to the Minister. The mission of MSET is to provide the legal and policy framework that guides innovation and development in the science, energy, and technology sectors to fuel growth. FLOW is a key partner in and enabler of Jamaica's digital transformation. And if we're to move forward in this digital era, the issue of theft and vandalism must be addressed. So let's now hear from Honorable Minister Darrell Vaz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the head table, media. You know, I'm a strong believer in faith. And this morning is not a morning for much talking from the minister or the ministry or the government, because enough has been said. And therefore, it is impatient of action. The stars have aligned. Why do I say that? Just yesterday, I had a meeting with Flow and Digicel, and that was specific to the theft of handsets, which is rampant and being taken, happening on a minutely basis. So much so that people are afraid to take their phones out in public. And you will speak to them and they will tell you that they have to come off the phone now because they're coming off the bus, or they're going into the bus park, or they're in halfway tree. That's no way for a country to run and citizens to behave. That meeting went into a lot of what has been said here by Stephen this morning. On top of which, just like Stephen, I awoke to I don't know how many WhatsApp messages of the incident last night. And one of those who sent it to me is my colleague, Minister Albin Hill. And his comments were that this cannot continue. This equates to terrorism. Similar sentiments. Then, this press conference was scheduled for this morning. And the bottom line is that, as Stephen said, time come. My regret is that this matter, in fairness, came to my attention by the telecom company. And unfortunately, COVID intervened. And of course, everybody got distracted and had to concentrate on other things which specifically in this ministry would have been the connectivity for schools, etc., etc. So for that, I apologize, because this is not something that is new. And of course, the stats that were presented today are very telling in relation to the length of time that this matter has been going on. And of course, instead of getting better, getting worse. So this script has no value to me this morning, because what the public at large wants to hear is, what is the government going to do? How are we going to team and work together to bring this matter under control? So I'll say a few things. Out of the meeting yesterday, I asked the two major telecom providers to provide me with a template that is agreed on by both in relation to short-term and medium-term measures that can be implemented. They have promised me that for next week. I, in turn, have promised them that come January morning, I will be chairing a task force, working group, whatever you want to call it, which is going to bring together all of government and, of course, the telecom providers, which will include other ministries, other ministers, the judiciary, the police, everybody who can play a role in this as to how and what we do to bring this under control. I agree fully with Stephen that an attack on this critical infrastructure, despite the fact that it is not government-owned, but it is a critical piece of infrastructure for the country to operate on a daily basis. So the fact that it is not government-owned does not make it any better or easier, because it is something that we rely on as a government, and every citizen in this country relies on telecoms companies, whichever one they choose. So that is something that we are going to have to do. I know for sure, based on the meeting yesterday and the brief that was given by my ministry, that the Telecommunications Act is being revised, and of course we will go to the maximum fines that are allowed in the parish court, which I think is between $3 and $5 million, and 3 to 5 years imprisonment, and second offense would be 5 million and up to 15 years. Again, I feel strongly that we have to take a look at this and see how we can encompass this, as we also are looking at the Cyber Crimes Act revision, the Joint Select Committee, because the bottom line is the two of them are interlinked in terms of the service that they give. The big thing coming out of this, and I must say, that this is quite unusual for a minister to be at an event such as this, because the bottom line is that, first of all, it's a direct responsibility of the government that we have not been able to achieve in terms of the protection of the equipment. But I thought it important because I want to send a very strong signal, and those who are in this room and those who are listening know that when I say something, I don't take it lightly. And this is an absolute priority for me as minister and my ministry. And I will be, when I leave here, I will be penning a letter to Minister Hill, and I will be advocating for the immediate suspension of copper exports under the scrap metal industry. I have no fear in saying that, despite the fact that we're about to go into Christmas season. Based on what has been presented here and the unequivocal evidence of the link between the both, is impatient of action and impatient of stemming this situation. I've already spoken to him based on our conversation this morning, and I am confident that he too will have his ministry revised and come to a position that can be announced in short order. But I believe strongly that that will send a very strong signal in relation to what we saw visually that took place this morning, which is reprehensible and unacceptable. So, ladies and gentlemen, truth be told, as I said, they prepared 5 or 6 pages for me. Nobody wants to hear that. What we want to hear is what is the plan of the government and the stakeholders which will bring this situation under control. Technology will have to be one of the most important aspects of any government and any country in today's world. And what we are seeing is it's becoming even more and more important based on new technology and innovations. And therefore, if we don't get the situation under control, then the country and Vision 2030 is in trouble. And the fact that we have other major situations with more serious crimes, which, as you know, the Prime Minister is, as we speak, in Washington, that does not make this any less important. And therefore, as Minister, I have the responsibility to make sure that this aspect of the crimes that are being committed is brought under control. We will speak, we will meet, and we will find solutions. We will use government apparatus, the government security forces, with private security forces, and all the technology that we can use in relation to stemming this. And I say without fear of contradiction, just like how there are a few hundred people, criminals holding this country to ransom, there is not more than a handful of persons who are carrying out and orchestrating these crimes. Thankfully, one of them was held this morning, and I'm sure when Stephanie leaves here, she'll make sure that he's interrogated properly to get to the others. And you have my commitment as Minister, Digicel, Flow, and all the other telecom providers that are facing this challenge, and others, JPS, whoever, that this is something that will be center for my ministry come January morning, so that we can, in fact, have a happy new year. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Vaz. We really welcome your support and the announcements that you just made. And we look forward to working with you in the new year on those. Now, as the voice of business in Jamaica and the umbrella organization for all chambers across the country, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce is working to build and promote a healthy economy and improve the quality of life of all Jamaicans. We'll now hear from Mr. Ian Nita, immediate past president of the JCC. Please welcome him.
Very much, Keon. Honorable Minister Vaz and General Manager and Vice President Stephen Price, all the other distinguished guests. The video that I saw this morning and that I hope goes viral angered me. And Stephen, I saw in your presentation your passion and your anger, and I hope it is a catalyst for change. And I agree with the Minister that the time has come and there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. So we are all disheartened that in 2022 we are still grappling with the issue of copper theft, equipment theft, and vandalism. So I worked at Flow up to 2005, and these were some of the problems then, but they have gotten exponentially worse. A few unscrupulous individuals are benefiting from these organized criminal activities, while hundreds of thousands of our citizens are negatively affected by this scourge. As a business support organization, we at the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce are deeply disturbed by the impact of this situation and the effect it is having on our members and the society at large. As a country, we have embarked on a mission to undertake digital transformation, e-commerce, e-learning, e-medicine. All are significantly affected when we experience downtime due to theft of lines and equipment. Many of our members have had to subscribe to two telecoms providers, with one being used as a backup because of the frequency of outages due to theft. This is a waste of resources, and it makes our businesses that much less competitive in the regional and international markets because of this additional cost. Internet downtime for small and medium enterprises results in loss of revenue, loss of productivity, and often can mean the difference between making a profit and experience a huge loss in business. When the internet runs your security system, you cannot afford an outage, as your safety is immediately compromised and your life and those of your employees or family are placed in danger. Flow too must be extremely frustrated to have to keep repairing the same lines again and again, as well as constantly replacing stolen batteries and fuel, etc. This is a tax on the business and a drain on precious foreign exchange, which should be better utilized in expanding capacity and improving service and efficiency. As debilitating as the theft is to businesses, it probably has a bigger impact on education. We witness so many students experiencing downtime in internet, especially during COVID. This lost time can hardly be recovered and will likely set us back decades. The internet is now the lifeblood of businesses, education, health, and leisure. It should be treated as a national treasure and guarded with the level of due care and urgency it deserves. The JCC is calling on the authorities to do whatever it takes through legislation, public awareness programs, and enforcement of laws to eliminate this crime, which jeopardizes our future. Penalties must fit the crime, and the theft of telecom lines and equipment, as well as vandalism to equipment, are grievous crimes. JCC stands with Flow and with you, Minister Vaz, and your ministry in the fight to remove this organized crime from our society and to free our digital infrastructure to drive productivity, employment, and growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nita. We appreciate your support as well, coming from the JCC. And now we hear from the private sector organization of Jamaica, which is a national organization of private sector associations, companies, and individuals working together to promote a competitive and productive private sector. We will now hear from Mrs. Jacqueline Sharp, Vice President of the PSOJ.
Thank you very much, Keon. Honorable Minister Vaz, Mr. Stephen Price, other distinguished guests, good morning. I think Ian has made my job very easy because I could simply say ditto to all of his comments, and we are speaking on behalf of the PSOJ and our large segment of our business community, including large corporates moving on to small businesses and micro businesses. We recognize the very, very critical role of stable, efficient, and modern digital infrastructure in propelling Jamaica's development goals and for us to compete effectively in a global marketplace. It's not just about competing here, but we have to be competing globally. And that's a very, very critical component that will enable us. And we know firsthand the critical role of ICT in modernizing and driving the business expansion and viability globally. And here closer to home, we've also seen the positive impact of ICT, particularly since the pandemic. It brought a whole new world to us and modern challenges. We've seen initiatives such as the e-commerce national delivery solution, ENS. I don't know if many of you remember that, but that was a very innovative solution that came about that allowed our businesses to continue to meet customer needs during the shutdowns, during the COVID period. Very, very critical, and the technology provided by the telecoms was a critical enabler for that platform. We've also seen expanding e-payment mechanisms such as mobile POS solutions, mobile wallets that create much more efficient options for businesses and consumers. And then, of course, we have seen the growth in all our industries, particularly BPOs, providing critical, much-needed jobs and foreign exchange earnings for our country. All of this, again, underpinned by a strong, stable, modern, efficient ICT infrastructure. And there's so much more to be done because Jamaica is ranked pretty low on that scale for digitalization when compared to other countries, not only in the region, but globally. So the work being done by Flow to implement and expand its digital services throughout the island is critical in advancing Jamaica as a digital society. We literally cannot afford to undermine our efforts to advance as a digital society through inaction or lack of enforcement against theft and vandalism of critical telecom infrastructure. We must take a firm stance against these acts of criminality to ensure that we're able to deliver on our mandate to make Jamaica the place of choice to work, do business, and raise families. And a multi-sectoral and collaborative response is required to ensure that efforts made to advance our ICT and telecoms infrastructure or sectors are not eroded by criminality and corruption. So Minister Vaz, we welcome the announcement that you're going to create a task force and incorporate various sectors, multi-sectors, to ensure that we get the most effective output from this task force and achieving the objectives of really solving these problems. And through the work of PSOJ's Public Safety Monitoring Committee, we have noted the strides being made to expand the reach of the Jamaica Eye Network, which has proven to be very useful in supporting the JCF's efforts in fighting crime. So theft and vandalism of cables are going to hamper and damage our CCTV cameras. We therefore must work collaboratively in addressing this far-reaching, cross-cutting criminal issue to safeguard our tools of national security. So the PSOJ stands ready to support the government, to support our telecoms, a critical member of our association, in fulfilling its mandate for national security, public order, and provision of a strong infrastructure to facilitate our growth as a digital society. We stand with all our partners here in advocating for a review of the necessary legislation and to ensure adequate enforcement measures to address these offenses. And again, we welcome Minister Vaz's announcements that he's prepared and ready to act on those legislative changes immediately. And in closing, I want to point to a little section of Stephen's presentation where it said that Vision 2030 will not be achieved if the critical ICT infrastructure is not protected and grown. So we stand ready to support you, Stephen, with Flow, government, and all their efforts to address this fundamental problem that we're facing with our telecom infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sharp, and we also welcome the PSOJ's support. At this time, we open the floor for questions. We ask that you identify yourself and your media house, and before you direct your question to the panel. We also invite persons who are joining online. If you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you would like, you can just raise your hand, you can indicate, and we will take your question live here in the room. Yes. Any questions for Minister Vaz? We will take those first.
Hello, good morning. Minister Vaz, you're known as a man of action. Just in summation, what would you recommend has to be done immediately here?
The amendments to the Telecoms Act will take some time in terms of the increase in the fines. So I think in terms of stemming the trend that is increasing of the theft, I think definitively that the recommendation for the suspension of the exports of the scrap metal industry specific to the copper would be, as Stephen said earlier, probably the quickest winner in terms of deterring the type of activity, criminal activity that's taking place. And as I said before, it requires swift action because what is happening here is unsustainable. And it's setting us back significantly in terms of the challenges that we are facing already in terms of connectivity throughout the island.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions coming from the floor?
I'll just say also that in relation to the theft of cell phones, coming out of the meeting yesterday, that I'm also expecting something on that from the telecom providers by next week, and I suspect that we'll be able to have that implemented early in the new year, where the phones can be disabled by both providers. So basically, the only benefit of the phones after that would be used for spare parts. But that also will be a huge deterrent if the phones can be shut down. And I think that both things in parallel will send a very strong signal and, of course, put us on the right track in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And just to say that will be in coordination with the police so that the police can carry out their activities, investigative activities. So it's not just a matter that someone steals a phone and it's disabled or shut down, and of course he goes on to steal others or whatever. The police will have a component in the structure that we're developing.
Okay, thank you, Minister Vaz. Are there any questions coming through from online?
Questions online yet?
Okay, thank you very much. A last check. Any questions? Any further questions from the floor?
I must admit I have a couple. Can I ask two questions? Or? Okay. One, this is a question directed at Stephen. Stephen, have you considered, and it was mentioned to me earlier on, the possibility of people inside the organization perpetrating these crimes, the theft and so forth? Will you be having to do an audit of staff and really looking into this matter internally to ensure that that's not the case? We've seen incidences, for instance, at Red Stripe, where it was an inside job. Perhaps you can give us your thoughts on that. That's one.
I think for us at Flow, I mean, we operate in an organization with a principle and culture of trust. But that doesn't mean that, for instance, it doesn't happen. I think in the telecom space, I'd say there's an ecosystem of maybe 20,000 employees which have cycled in and out of the telecommunication industry over the past 10, 15 years. So there are a lot of persons who have the ability and understand the telecoms infrastructure. We remain vigilant, however, as a business, both internally and externally, in terms of carrying out our necessary investigations. It is not only external, it's also internal, but we have found no link to date. Not saying that it may not exist, but we have been very vigilant in terms of access control, in terms of the various security measures that we have internally, which we believe that we're fairly protected here.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. My next question is directed at both Ian and Jackie. Right, in their private sector capacity, both of you expressed solidarity with the telecoms players, but what can you both tangibly do? Do you have to message to protect the players? Because it's most unfortunate that they put serious investment, and Keon mentioned it, and they're losing millions of US dollars, and they've just got to take that on the chin. But what can you do that can really help them to prevent this? Can you message jointly? What can you do, put on the table to help them?
All right, Jackie, I just mentioned a comment that first of all, we are advocating on their behalf because our members are feeling pain. I mentioned that we have some of our businesses who are taking the supply from 2 companies and are paying twice and only using one as a redundancy. So it is in our interest to advocate on their behalf. I use this opportunity to say that we have also been meeting with JPS because they also suffer from a culture of theft. And one of the things that we find that we have to do is shine a light on this theft. We track crime as if murder is the only crime. And sometimes when there's a theft of electricity, we say, is a man do a thing and just getting some, electricity, leave him alone. We have to address the culture of theft and deal with it in a way that people understand that this is an abhorrent behavior. The other avenue open to us is the tracking of the incidents. So one of the things we're doing is working through CMOC, which is the Crime Management Oversight Committee, to place the theft of utilities as part of their metrics of that they'll be tracking it. What you measure gets done, what gets tracked gets done. So we want to put some visibility on it to say, like, in this quarter we had so much theft, and next quarter it has gone in the right direction, it has moved down, and so on. So that's another area that we want to bring to it, the measurement of the crime. So in this case, we would say we had a major incident in December and track it and shed light on it. So I think that, that's an area that we can also play a role. I don't know if you want to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, it's similar response. I'd say advocacy efforts to get the right legislation, the right enforcement mechanisms in place, and also to raise awareness among our members so that we can support the JCF in their enforcement measures by just keeping an eye in addition to tracking various incidents, but just making sure that we're aware of what's going on around us and highlighting things like Crime Stop, continuing to fund that, and also to raise incidents so that they can be addressed. But just creating that level of awareness among our members is a very, very critical component that will help the efforts.
Very much. Are there any other questions? Last call. One final check. Any questions coming in from online? Time come. All right.
We do have one question.
Oh,
online.
We do have one question coming from online.
So this question comes from Therese Turner, and she says, this press conference is taking place at the same time as the CDB's conference on corruption. society in general needs to address corruption at a wide level. Is there any thought to a campaign in conjunction with the Integrity Action organization?
All right. Did she direct that to any particular person?
No, she didn't.
All right. Minister or Stephen?
Business is to stem the problem, and then you can now go to the next step. As far as I'm concerned, right now the focus must be on how do we stem and stop the increase in the theft that is taking place. And then, of course, all discussions can take place after that. I think that's a priority.
That's the message, Mr. And I think, in addition to that, the stakeholder group that will assemble in the new year, definitely that could be a route by which we bring everybody to the table, inclusive of this group.
This is straight, raw criminality, and it must be dealt with as such.
Well said, well said. Final question, and then we'll close.
I just took the minister's point there, but this is a question directed, well, firstly at Deputy Super Lindsay. Do you think, we've talked about the theft this morning, and it's evident and the invidious nature of it, but do you think this is particularly elevated since COVID? And do you think this is what the contraction of the economy and what happened? I mean, it's something that's happened in the world once in a century, the last century. But do you think that's what's driving this criminality, as the minister just talked? Are you seeing a trend from that?
Okay. So I'm not sure that you can really associate it with COVID, because if you look at the timeline that Stephen showed in his presentation, it's a problem that existed from way back to 2016, thereabout. But like many other things, we would see a lull during COVID period and a lull during a period when there was a ban on the industry. But I think when you look at what is really driving, the driving force is the whole organized crime network and the need to acquire more assets for the criminal, for them to sustain their criminal bases. So when you have us in the law enforcement, we're seizing more guns, we're finding more ammunition, then they're going to want to do more to replace those. So as we clamp down from the law enforcement side and make things more difficult for them to operate and shut down some of their means of acquiring these resources, then you also find that they will do that. We have gotten through evidence coming out of criminal prosecution of gang members that they also use the proceeds from these things to pay for their defense because we're locking up more people. So there is a correlation between what we do in law enforcement, what the service providers do to make it more difficult for their asset to be attacked by criminals. So the more you tighten things, then the more you see the demand. So I believe that what we're seeing now as an increase is really a demand by the criminal organizations to get more. And that is why we're now introducing in these investigation and these prosecution, the Proceed of Crime Act, because the more we can remove the benefits and the cash and the resources from the criminal network, the less potent they will be to continue to survive as a criminal organization.
So just to say that in speaking to Stephen about the incident this morning, to give you a perspective. So what the police was able to apprehend has a value of probably 10 million Jamaican dollars. And the value to the scrap metal portion of it would be a maximum of 500,000 Jamaican? 500,000 Jamaican dollars. So look at the value of the damage to flow and look at the impact on the customer base and critical sectors, including law enforcement. And you understand when you put those two together, the monetary and the impact, it's I mean, impatient of action. And that's what I'm committing.
Thank you very much, Minister, and that's a good note for us to end on. Thank you, everyone. Just inviting our speakers to join us right here at the front for a quick photo.